Chapter 1. A Seat in First Class. The hum of conversation filled the cabin as Naomi Carter stepped into the first-class section of Flight 672, rolling her carry-on behind her. She moved with quiet confidence, her navy blue blazer crisp, her posture upright. To most, she was just another well-dressed traveler. But Naomi had seen it before, the way certain people scanned her up and down, looking for a reason to believe she didn't belong. She placed her bag in the overhead compartment, her motions practiced and controlled. Years in the aviation industry had made every detail second nature to her. She had taken this New York to Los Angeles route dozens of times. Only this time, she wasn't in the cockpit. She was here to rest before her next assignment. The moment she settled into her seat, she felt it, the eyes. A flight attendant in their mid-30s, blonde hair pulled back into a severe ponytail, hovered by the galley, whispering to a coworker. The smirks they exchanged weren't subtle. Naomi exhaled slowly. She had no patience for small-minded assumptions. A few minutes later, the blonde approached her, her name tag flashing. Rachel. "Ma'am, I think you might be in the wrong seat," Rachel said, her voice polite but laced with condescension. Naomi turned her head slowly. "Excuse me." Rachel gestured toward Naomi's seat with a stiff smile. "This is first class." "I'm aware." Naomi reached into her bag and retrieved her boarding pass, holding it out with calm precision. "Seat 3A." Rachel's smile faltered as she scanned the pass. A flicker of surprise crossed her face before she forced another saccharine grin. "Oh, my mistake." She took a step back, glancing toward another flight attendant, a younger brunette who had been watching the exchange. They both chuckled under their breath before Rachel turned away. Naomi tapped her fingers lightly on the armrest. It never failed. No matter how many barriers she broke, no matter how much she achieved, people like Rachel always saw her and assumed less. Chapter 2. Microaggressions at 30,000 feet. Minutes later, another flight attendant, Lisa, according to her name tag, came by with a tray of welcome drinks. Champagne and orange juice. Naomi reached for a glass, but Lisa pulled the tray back slightly. "Would you like me to bring you something from a coach?" she asked, her voice overly sweet. "We have a few options back there if this isn't your style." Naomi's fingers hovered midair. Slowly, she met Lisa's gaze, her expression unreadable. "This will do," she said evenly, taking the champagne flute and setting it down on her tray table. Lisa hesitated, as if she wanted to say more, but thought better of it and walked away. 2 rows behind Naomi, a couple laughed, an older man and his wife, sipping their drinks. The wife leaned over and whispered something into her husband's ear. They both chuckled again. Naomi had spent a lifetime navigating these moments, the polite exclusion, the lingering stares, the careful microaggressions wrapped in customer service smiles. She could have spoken up. She could have put them all in their place with a single sentence. But she chose silence. For now. Chapter 3. The Unexpected Turn. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome aboard Flight 672, a nonstop service to Los Angeles. We're expecting a smooth ride today, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight." Naomi closed her eyes briefly, exhaling as the engines roared to life. The irony of the announcement wasn't lost on her. The hum of the engines filled the cabin as flight attendants distributed meal trays and took drink orders. Rachel passed by without a glance in Naomi's direction, serving every other passenger first. When she finally set down Naomi's tray, the motion was just a little too forceful, the silverware rattling against the ceramic. Naomi didn't react. Across the aisle, a middle-aged woman, the same one who had questioned her earlier, leaned in again, curiosity still in her eyes. "So, you're really a pilot?" she asked, her voice teetering between fascination and doubt. "Yes," Naomi replied, not bothering to elaborate. The woman gave a small laugh as if waiting for Naomi to admit she was joking. When no such admission came, her expression shifted. "Well, that's something," she mused, stirring her drink. "I don't think I've ever met a female pilot before. Especially not." She hesitated as if rethinking her words. Then she offered a tight smile. "You must be very unique." Naomi turned her head slightly, meeting the woman's gaze with an unreadable expression. "I suppose I am." The woman nodded, as if satisfied with the response, and returned to her meal. though she glanced Naomi's way a few more times as if still trying to figure her out. Rachel caught Lisa by the galley. Naomi watched their quiet exchange, the quick glances in her direction, the whispered words, the smirk that flickered across Rachel's lips. She had seen this behavior before. They didn't see her as a passenger. They saw her as a curiosity, an anomaly, an intruder in a space they thought belonged to someone else. She sighed, adjusting her seat slightly. She had promised herself she wouldn't let this bother her. And yet, the irritation simmered beneath the surface. Then, turbulence hit. Chapter 4. The Descent into Chaos. The plane lurched violently, shaking Naomi from her thoughts. Gasps rippled through the first-class cabin as passengers gripped their armrests, eyes wide with alarm. The overhead compartments rattled, and a few unsecured items tumbled onto the aisle. Naomi's pilot instincts kicked in immediately. She kept her breathing steady, glancing around at the passengers' panicked faces. The turbulence wasn't severe, but it was enough to rattle those unfamiliar with flying. Rachel, the flight attendant who had earlier displayed thinly veiled hostility, stumbled slightly as she clutched a seat for balance. "This is just a bit of turbulence, ladies and gentlemen." The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Nothing to worry about. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." Naomi's grip on the armrest loosened slightly. She trusted the pilot, but she also knew the importance of being prepared. Across the aisle, the middle-aged woman who had questioned her earlier was now clutching her husband's arm. "This doesn't feel normal," she whispered, her face pale. "It's fine," Naomi said calmly, turning to look at her. "The plane is designed for this. The pilots have it under control." But the woman didn't seem reassured. Instead, she gave Naomi a long, calculating look, as if weighing whether she truly believed her. Chapter 5. A Call for Help. Just as the turbulence began to subside, a crackle came over the intercom. The co-pilot's voice, laced with tension, filled the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing an unexpected issue. If there is any qualified flight personnel on board, please make yourself known to the cabin crew immediately." A collective gasp swept through first class. Naomi's heartbeat quickened. She didn't hesitate. Unbuckling her seatbelt, she stood and made her way toward the galley where Rachel and Lisa were already speaking in hushed tones. "I'm a pilot," Naomi said, her voice firm. "Tell me what's going on." Rachel's lips parted slightly as if she wanted to protest, but the urgency of the moment left no room for hesitation. She grabbed Naomi's wrist and pulled her toward the cockpit door. Lisa knocked sharply. "Captain, we have someone here." The door opened just enough for the co-pilot's pale face to appear. His eyes flicked to Naomi, scanning her as if deciding whether to trust her. "I need to see your credentials," he said, voice clipped. Without a word, Naomi reached into her blazer pocket and produced her pilot's ID, the airline's logo gleaming under the dim cabin lights. The co-pilot nodded quickly. "Get in." Naomi stepped into the cockpit, her stomach tightening as she took in the situation before her. The captain sat slumped in his seat, unconscious. And the plane was slowly losing altitude. Chapter 6. Taking Control. Naomi's pulse quickened as she stepped fully into the cockpit, her eyes darting across the instrument panel. The altitude indicator showed they were gradually descending, too fast for comfort. The autopilot was still engaged, but something was off. The co-pilot, a man in his early 40s named Daniel Green, looked shaken but alert. He wiped sweat from his brow and turned toward her. "I don't know what happened," he said quickly. "Captain Hendricks complained of a headache before takeoff. 15 minutes ago, he slumped over, unresponsive. I called for help, but I can't manage this alone." Naomi didn't waste a second. She slid into the captain's seat, instinct taking over. "Did he say anything before he passed out? Any signs of distress?" she asked, adjusting the throttle and stabilizing the descent. "He mentioned dizziness," Daniel replied. "Then he just went limp." Naomi's gut twisted. She checked the oxygen levels, normal, and scanned the communication panel. "Have you contacted air traffic control?" "Not yet," Daniel admitted. "I was focusing on maintaining control, but the descent's been hard to manage alone." Naomi pressed the radio button. "Mayday, Mayday, this is Flight 672, declaring an emergency. Captain Hendricks is incapacitated. I am Naomi Carter, licensed commercial pilot, assisting the first officer in command. We require immediate guidance. A crackling response came seconds later. Flight 672, this is Denver Center. Copy that. What's your status? Naomi relayed their altitude, speed, and heading, while Daniel input the necessary adjustments. The aircraft leveled out, though Naomi could still feel the unease lingering in the cabin. We need to prepare for a possible emergency landing, she said. How's the fuel? Enough to get us to LAX. But if we need to land sooner, we could divert to Denver or Phoenix. Naomi nodded. Let's keep our options open. First, let's stabilize everything. Chapter 7, The Weight of Judgment. Meanwhile, back in the first-class cabin, passengers exchanged nervous glances as murmurs spread through the seats. Rachel and Lisa had retreated to the galley, whispering amongst themselves. Rachel scoffed. So she's really a pilot? Lisa shrugged. Guess so. Still hard to believe. Rachel folded her arms. I just don't see how someone like her could. She's our best shot at landing safely. A voice interrupted. Rachel turned to see the middle-aged woman from earlier, her sharp gaze piercing. You might want to get over whatever little bias you have and start hoping she knows what she's doing. Rachel's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She turned away, feeling the weight of judgment shift onto her for once. Chapter 8, A Race Against Time. Back in the cockpit, Naomi was laser-focused. She monitored the instruments while keeping in constant communication with air traffic control. We need to assess the captain's condition, she told Daniel. Can someone in the cabin help? I'll ask, he said, pressing the intercom button. If there's a doctor on board, please make yourself known to the flight attendants immediately. Naomi's eyes flicked to the runway options. Denver was closest, but they could make LAX if they stayed stable. The biggest risk? If anything else went wrong. Then, a sudden, sharp beep rang through the cockpit. A warning light flashed red on the control panel. Naomi's stomach dropped. The left engine was failing. Daniel swore. We're losing power. Naomi gripped the controls, steadying her breath. She had fought tooth and nail to prove herself in a world that doubted her at every turn. Now, she had to prove it again, this time with hundreds of lives on the line.